As we all know, Gears of War Ultimate Edition appeared on the Windows 10 store on PC with nary a fanfare from Microsoft, leaving many PC gamers who had been eagerly awaiting the title to be a bit like, wait what, it's out? And sadly we were treated to a less than perfect release if you were using certain AMD cards, as if you were one of the unlucky few, or few isn't really the right word, this problem seems to be fairly common, but hey ho, you were treated, I guess, to some rather horrific visual corruption, of which I have never really seen before. I can't really describe it. It's like there's lots of tiny little squares along the screen where graphics should be, and there's a lot of little black blocks where stuff is missing and it's kind of like jarred out of place. It's really quite strange. I've never seen anything like it. So, many people have been wondering what on earth is causing this supposedly AAA PC title to be in such a horrific state. And it seems that Nvidia's HBAO Plus ambient occlusion feature was actually the culprit behind the horrible artifacting and visual corruption issue that plagued some of AMD's graphics cards. Now, what makes this all the more strange is there was no mention of HBAO Plus inside the graphics settings menu of Gears of War Ultimate Edition. If you take a look at the graphics menu, which I will show as a screenshot in the video right about now, you will see there is only an option to turn ambient occlusion on or off, with basically no mention as to what type of ambient occlusion it actually is. Now usually when you have a vendor-specific visual effect, it usually ends up listed under its vendor-specific designation. For example, if it's Tress Effects, which is AMD, or at least used to be, it'll say Tress Effects, and if it's Hairworks, it'll say Hairworks, and HBO Plus will be listed under HBAO rather than Ambient Occlusion. So naturally, when there's no mention of any specific vendor, it's assumed, hey, this is just your garden variety, hardware agnostic, ambient occlusion, or whatever the effect in question is. This is going to work equally across cards. It's not Nvidia's, it's not AMD's, yada yada yada. However, in the case of Gears of War Ultimate Edition, it was Nvidia's proprietary HBAO Plus GameWorks feature listed under a generic name. Now, we only know that ambient occlusion was actually HBAO Plus because Nvidia's Andrew Burns announced the availability of game-ready drivers on the GeForce.com blog and basically named it as one of the game's features. Basically it says, quote, furthermore, the PC edition's graphical fidelity is improved through the introduction of Nvidia HBAO Plus ambient occlusion shadowing. Now sadly, there is no explanation as to why HBAO Plus was labelled a generic ambient occlusion title. As I said, usually, as we've even seen in, for example, Far Cry 4 and other such titles, when you go into ambient occlusion, it'll either just be, normal, HBO Plus, and then, whatever else options that there are available, and of course will tell you, hey, this is an Nvidia GameWorks thing, so obviously you shouldn't be using it if it's not an Nvidia card. Or perhaps if you have a lower end card, you don't want to be using a thing like HBAO Plus. But this was not listed as such, it was just ambient occlusion, which obviously led to people with AMD cards to be like, alright, cool. So, yeah, that seems to be the culprit behind the issues on some AMD cards for Gears of War. And what makes it slightly worse is that, say you've got a pretty powerful PC, your first check on a game that you just bought is probably to set everything to ultra and just see how it plays and perhaps tweak as necessary. Now if you were to do this on Gears of War, HBAO Plus would be enabled by default on that particular setting, so you'd actually have to go out of your way to do that and disable it if you've set everything to ultra. Now obviously you can solve this by turning off ambient occlusion in the settings, but while it solves the artifacting and the horrible problems, then obviously that has drawbacks of its own. However, it's much, much more preferable to having that horrible artifacting on screen. So if you were encountering these problems, turning off ambient occlusion for the moment will seem to fix it. However, here's where things continue to get stranger. HBAO Plus isn't the only thing being hidden in Gears of War on PC. Now basically there was a very interesting hidden game file spotted by a YouTuber by the name of Blind Run, and basically it's a base engine.ini which can be found on a folder path which is very long and convoluted, and it is a protected folder. But once you get inside a base engine, there is a very peculiar entry: B disable PhysX hardware support equals false. Now, if you try to edit this so that it's true, so you're disabling PhysX hardware support, the game will simply overwrite any changes once it's booted up and connected to Microsoft servers. So, as you may guess, what this means is that PhysX is enabled by default in the game, because any changes to this particular file are automatically written over by the game upon startup. Now obviously, PhysX is something that can only be accelerated by Nvidia's own graphics card. Now, if a competing GPU is detected by the PhysX driver, it will basically automatically be offloaded onto the CPU. So basically, it means that this particular feature will run disproportionately slower on non-Nvidia systems. Now usually, as you probably know, if a game has PhysX features, it's just a simple option within the game's menu to disable it or enable it as you so desire. As of course, PhysX features usually include things like debris, water physics, and other such things like paper moving around in Batman, just for example, interacting with things like smoke, that sort of thing. Now obviously this is pretty damn necessary, because if you're using an AMD system, then you don't want PhysX enabled, because all that work is going to be offloaded onto a CPU, which, unless you've got a damn beefy CPU, is going to result in poorer performance. And because the game is literally overwriting this setting each time it's booted up, for the moment at least, this setting cannot be disabled, and it cannot be tested as to how much the game would run better without it, because, well, it's impossible at the moment. So basically, if you have an AMD card, wait, oh my god, wait until they fix this and hopefully explain what the balls they were playing at. Because the ambient occlusion thing, that's bad enough, but having PhysX enabled by force and basically making it impossible to disable it, that's where things go from pretty bad to ultra bad as far as I'm concerned. So yes, not great to say the least. Wish I had better news for AMD users, but it seems for now I would avoid like the plague. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.